Now at the back, I think this might be better now. So friends, I was saying there's a growing, rising darkness across our country, and indeed in many parts of the world. There is a poison in the air, a poison more deadly than the poison that gathered in the air in Bhopal in 1984. Because this is a poison of hate and of fear. And it is a poison even more dangerously of our collective silences. There is unfolding around us a project to intimidate, to terrify, and ultimately to turn into second-class citizens the country's minorities, its Muslim and Christian brothers and sisters, and our Dalit brothers and sisters. The principal instrument that is being used, especially to intimidate Muslims and segments of the Dalit community, is the instrument of lynching. We try to search for the Hindi translation of the word lynching, and we found that there isn't an equivalent word for this in any Indian language. Lynching is basically a phenomenon in which mobs attack people in a public place and kill them brutally. Hate violence of the kind that we are seeing with lynching has happened in India for a long time. In fact, India was born in a storm of hate violence in which 1 million people lost their lives in Hindu-Muslim riots. We've had, in the 70 years of independence, many episodes of communal violence in which large numbers of lives have been lost. But lynching is a peculiar phenomenon because a communal massacre, however large, is still bound by two things. It is bound by geography and it is bound by time. In simple words, a communal massacre, whether it was the 1984 Sikh riots or the violence in Gujarat in 2002, it covers a particular geographical area and continues for a period of time, and it leaves a huge trail of destruction and hate in its wake. But lynching comes with a message that a person of that targeted community is not safe anyway. Every person of that targeted community, and the majority of the cases of lynching have been against Muslims across the country. So the message is that you are no longer safe in your home, on the streets, at a workplace, on a train. Nowhere are you safe, and you can be attacked. And I've seen now across India a sense of everyday fear that has settled into the hearts of millions of our Muslim brothers and sisters. The fear against Christian minorities has taken a different path, and this has been through large-scale attacks on places of worship, especially in tribal areas, and on priests and nuns. But the purpose is the same, to create a sense of fear. But it is important to remember that this sense of fear and hate is not restricted only to Muslims, Christians and Dalits. There is another target of this hate violence, and that is violence against people who have the courage to stand up like Gauri Lankesh in solidarity with people who are suffering from fear and hate and violence. They too, and the message with the attack on this brave woman who spoke for justice and truth, braving every kind of intimidation, is that if you dare speak out, then this is what can happen to you. So I was speaking about this poison more dangerous than the MIC gas that was leaked in Bhopal in 1984. But to my mind, even more poisonous than this climate of fear and hate, this is the poison of the collective silences of the large majority of Indians, while this darkness is gathering in our land. When a young boy in his teens, Junaid, was knifed to death on a train compartment close to Delhi where I live, I went and visited his family in the way that we are doing in this caravan. And I wrote after that an article in which I started with the words, Junaid was my son. I did not know him when he was alive, but in the circumstances that he was killed, I mourned him like a son. I spoke about this young boy whose dreams were very different from mine. He wanted to become an imam, he memorized the Quran, and had come home for the Ramzan holidays, proud that he had completed the memorizing of the Quran, and he had been designated a Hafiz. Hafiz means one who memorizes in Arabic, but also one who is a custodian of the word of the Quran. And he had, the day before he died, he had completed over 20 nights the recitation of the Quran by memory. And because when he completed this, he was rewarded with small gifts of money by the people of his village. It was total of 1500 rupees, and he thought he would go to the city of Delhi and buy gifts for Eid for his family. And with his two brothers he set out. It was unusual that day that he wore jeans, because normally he wore kurta pajama, but he made the big mistake of wearing a skull cap. And we know the story, but when he got into the train, there was place, he sat down with his brothers, playing Ludo on his mobile phone. Next station, a group of men came in and they demanded that they should vacate their places. Junaid got up because there was an old man and he gave him his seat. But the other brothers did not, and they started pulling their beards, throwing off their skull caps, beating them more and more brutally. So Junaid realized that things were getting really bad. So next station was theirs, called Ballabgarh. And he called his brothers on the phone, said desperately, come on your bikes and try to rescue us. The brothers reached, but instead of allowing these boys to go out, they were also pulled in. It was 9 minutes between that station and the next. And in those 9 minutes, Junaid was stabbed more than 30 times. His blood was flowing across the compartment. The most terrifying thing was that there wasn't one person who came to try to protect him. Even the old man to whom he had given his seat was goading the others to kill. So people were either killing or inciting the violence, or taking videos of the violence, or keeping silent. When they reached the next station, it was all of 9 minutes. The boy was bleeding badly, the other two brothers also. They threw the 3 boys onto the platform and ran away. For an hour, those boys bled, and Junaid bled to death with his head on his brother's lap. Not one person came to help him. And I went with my friends after visiting his family to the railway station, and we asked the station master. There are a number of shops, it's a rural station, everything is open, and we kept asking them what happened, why didn't you help the boys? And they said, we saw nothing. And so in my article, when I wrote Junaid was my son, I ended the article by saying Junaid was also the son of those who were travelling with him on that railway compartment that day. He was also the son of those on that railway platform, in that railway station. And yet we let him die. I was restless for many nights after visiting Junaid's family. My soul felt torn apart. And one night I recalled that I had read of a similar incident happening somewhere in the US. And so I went on to Google and I searched, and I found an extraordinary story that had happened in the same month of Ramzan at the other end of the world, in the United States, in a place called Portland. In both of these stories, there were hate attacks on teenage children, Muslim children, on a train compartment. In both of these stories, knives were taken out and blood flowed. But these two stories were as different as a dark, moonless night and a summer afternoon. What happened in Portland? 2 teenage girls, black girls, one of them wearing a hijab, got into this train, and a white man stood up and started attacking them. He was abusing them, and he told them many things, including that you should go back to Saudi Arabia. Apparently here everyone is, minorities are told they must go to Pakistan, there they told you have to go to Saudi Arabia. As this was going on, 3 different men, white men all, got up from different parts of the compartment, and they came and they started telling this man that you cannot do this, you cannot do this. And they formed a ring between those 2 girls and that white man who was shouting. And the girls got up very terrified and started leaving the compartment. While they were just about to get off, they turned their head, and what do they see? They see that this man takes out a knife and he slashes the first man on his throat and he falls. He slashes the second man on his throat, he also falls. And third man is running and he knives him on his knee, on his leg, but he gets away. The first man was a 23-year-old college student, and he was bleeding badly. Few people tried to help him, and he said after some time, I think I'm going to die. And his last words before he died was, tell everybody on this train that I love them. tell everybody on this train that I love them. The second man, he was retired defense personnel. He came onto the platform and died. The third man was saved, taken to a hospital. His life got saved. There was an outpouring of sympathy, especially from the Muslim American community. They collected more than $1 million and they had a big program to honor him. And he said two beautiful things in the program like this where they called him to be honored. The first of them he said was that all of you have expressed so much concern. The whole country is rallying behind me and these other two men who died. But you've forgotten who you should really be concerned about. And he said, we should all be concerned about those two teenage girls who were subjected to this hate attack as young children. Think of what must be going on in their minds and hearts, and we should all rally behind them. Forget about us, we'll take care of ourselves. And then he said another thing. He said, you're saying that we are big heroes, but tell me, what is so heroic about taking care of your children? All we did was to take care of our children. Junaid was my son. And it is with this idea of love that must bind each of us. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, non-believer, rich, poor, man, woman, homosexual, transgender, this caste, this language, that region, able, disabled. What is it that ultimately must bind us? It is the feeling that we do belong to and with each other. There is a word in the Constitution. There are 4 foundational principles that are laid out in the Constitution that we the people gave to ourselves. 3 of them we understand: justice, liberty, equality. But the 4th is fraternity. And Dr. Ambedkar said that even of these 4 principles, the most important is fraternity. Because fraternity ultimately means brotherhood, but also sisterhood. It means caring, it means belonging. The Hindi word that is used is very beautiful. It is bandhuta. For fraternity, the word is bandhuta. Bandhuta ultimately means that we are bound to each other. It is an ideology of friendship. It means that when Abdul here is, somebody pierces his head with a trishul, I feel the pain on my head. I suffer with him. That is the love that we felt we must carry in our hearts and claim and reclaim in this journey that we call the Karwan-e Mohabbat. There were 2 objectives. One is to communicate to our Muslim, Christian, Dalit brothers and sisters that they are not alone at this time, that we all stand together. But there is, as Vartha had said, an even more important message that we are carrying, and that is the message that we must not remain silent. That silence means in times of the time that we are living in, that we agree, we consent. If we remain silent, our hands too carry the blood of the innocents who are killed. They can be, I thought hard, what could be the reasons for our silences? And again the contrast with the United States, and I never thought a day would come when I would compare ourselves unfavorably with the American people. But just think, in America, Donald Trump passed this outrageous order saying that citizens from 7 Muslim dominant countries will not be permitted and will have to prove their bona fides. In a sense, he was clearly saying that if you are Muslim, then you are suspect. And the burden now is on you to prove that you are not above suspicion. Muslims form only about 1% of the American population. But what did we find? We found within hours of that order, spontaneously, people gathered at every major airport where these people were being locked, and they put up posters saying, everybody is welcome here. I saw a poster which actually said, we are all Muslims now. There was a Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, whom we remember largely as this warmongering, very trusty woman. She put out a tweet saying, I was raised as a Catholic, my parents were probably Jewish, but in solidarity today, I register myself as a Muslim. People went to their Muslim neighbors in small towns and kasbahs across America, knocked on their doors and told them, you should not be frightened, we are standing, we are all together with you. Religious leaders said, that we must, what is the true teaching of our religion. I saw these beautiful words from Christian leaders there who said that Jesus Christ was actually an immigrant, a homeless immigrant, probably from the very parts of the world who you are blocking out today. Jewish leaders said, when we said never again after the Holocaust, we never said never again only for Jewish people, we said never again for any people. And in these many ways, they showed us what the practice of love in a society can be. And then I look around, lynching after lynching, and what we encounter is largely silences. And there can be only 3 reasons for our silences. The first of them can be that I'm too frightened to speak. The second can be, and the fear that is generated is around us for people who do speak. The second reason can be, I don't care. I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Dalit. How does it matter to me? But the third reason, and there can be a third reason, and to me that is the most terrifying of all the reasons. And that reason is that in my heart I actually carry the same sentiments of hate. And the mob, I've more or less outsourced to the mob the violence that I would like to see happening to these communities. And I fear that 1 and 2 may be reasons, but I'm seeing more and more that the third is perhaps the dominant reason, because when you probe even a little bit in our conversations in living rooms, in places where violence has happened, in the end, the idea is that somehow that person who is the victim and the community to which he belongs is guilty and deserves this violence. And non-violent, gentle, law-abiding Hindu people are provoked by them into this anger, but it is their fault. And we hear this over and over again. I also want to say something that why are we talking about it today? Lynching did start, in fact, substantially in this part of the country right from 2004. And we have had incidents of lynching. But India spent is an organization which did a very quick survey of cases of lynching related to cows that have occurred since 2010. And their findings are very critical, and I'll place them before you. 97% of these incidents have happened after Mr. Narendra Modi came to power. 97% of these incidents. 86% of them killed Muslims. 8% killed Dalits. That's 94. And the remaining 6% also had identities unknown, so the numbers could be even more. That is the reality of what we're seeing around us. And we might, the Prime Minister every 6 months or a year, usually on foreign soil, makes a 2-line, 3-line general statement saying that he is opposed to what is happening. It carries very little conviction, because you can accuse Mr. Narendra Modi of many things, but one thing you cannot accuse him of is weakness. If he really felt that this violence should stop, he would stop. He would make sure that they would stop. If he felt hate speech was wrong, then his own closest allies, beginning with the party president, senior ministers, would not keep mouthing the worst kind of criminal hate speech that incites violence. His chief ministers would not justify the violence and call the person who is the victim criminals, smugglers, and so on. So there is an enabling, permissive environment for hate that has been created. And that is why there is a very high duty for us to respond. And with all of this in mind, we decided to take out what we call a caravan of love, starting with Assam and ending in Porbandar, covering many states. We covered Assam and Jharkhand. This is our third state. And we will be going Delhi, Haryana, Western UP, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and ending up in Porbandar. It has been just 5 days. Today is the 6th day of the caravan, and my soul feels deeply weighed down. I have met from Assam. The first family we met was the family of Riaz, a young teenage boy who had gone fishing with his cousin, and a crowd came out and said that they were cow thieves, and they lynched them brutally to death and mutilated their bodies, cut off their ears, gouged out their eyes. The kind of hatred was incredible. And this morning, through the many families that we met Harish Pujari's mother, and I thought of all the families that I've met who had to carry the heaviest burden that the world can give. In fact, in the Mahabharata, there is a questioning between Yaksha and Yudhishthira, and Yaksha asks which is the heaviest burden that a man has to carry, and they said the body of one's own child. And I was thinking about in India, where so many of our brothers and our sisters have had to carry, just over these past 2 or 3 years, this heaviest burden, from Riaz's parents to Harish Pujari's, only because of this climate of permissive hate. And then there's a rationalization. And let me tell you 2 of the stories, because these are lesser known, that we encountered. went to a place in Giridih where something very similar to what had happened to Akhlaq had happened to a man called Usman. He was the only Muslim living in the village very happily. He had 10 cows. One of them died of a sickness, and in the village they threw the body in a dump at a corner of the village, which he did. 2 days later, a crowd landed up at his house saying that he had killed that cow for its meat. What had happened that somebody had cut off the corpse of the cow, somebody had cut off the head, and the head had disappeared. He tried to argue that if I had to kill my cow for meat, I wouldn't take away the head because nobody eats that. The body was lying there, the head had disappeared, but nobody was willing to listen to any kind of reasoning. And this huge crowd gathered, they pulled him out, they stripped him, he was an old man, and they beat him to unconsciousness. They locked up his son and daughter-in-law in the house and set it on fire. And the police, there was one case where the police finally came on time. And for days and days he was unconscious. He was just, and he continues to be so frightened that when our karma went, the family wasn't willing to even tell us where he was hiding. And we finally had to stop somewhere on the main road, and they took 4 of us secretly to this place where this man was hiding. And when we met him, he just kept crying. He said, my neighbors came and attacked me, I don't know what to do. I don't think, his body was broken, his soul was broken. And he said, I don't know what my future holds out for me. And I cannot go back to my village in this fear, but I cannot live anywhere else. And his family was going around begging at that time also because they had no money, no one took care of him. And they had registered cases against them. So after that we had called for what we're calling an Amal Insaniyat committee. And I went there and to the major part of the other panchayat and where there was this big meeting. And I was very pleased to find that there was a large crowd of almost 500 people, and I said, wow, that's great. But in just a little while people started making speeches saying, a small incident has happened, we should forget about it. And all these people have been sent to jail for this, we should just get them released. And after a little while I realized that what they had really expected was that we were bringing this caravan of peace, and what they would say is, let's sit together, let Usman and his family say that we don't recognize any of the people who the police had arrested. All of them will get released, no one will be punished. And in return for that, we will allow him to come back to the village. And I told them that is what you're suggesting is not peace, but the very opposite of peace. It is really the acceptance of second-class citizenship. And when you say it's a small incident, and people after people said small incident happened and we should forget about it, I said, God forbid, if it was your father, whom your neighbors had almost beaten to death on a false rumor and set on fire your house, and I would come 2 months later and say, it's a small incident, you should forget about it. And then it got even more and more heated, and they all said that, all you're doing is taking the side of Muslims, and so on and so forth. And this thing became Hindu suffering versus Muslim suffering, and then they said he was a bad man, he was a criminal, and he deserved what happened to him. And I heard echoes of what we'd heard in Dadari, where Akhlaq had been killed, exactly the same rationalizations in drawing rooms with people we know, that somehow the Muslim is by definition guilty, even when they suffer the worst violence. By definition, the Hindu is always innocent, even when they perpetrate the worst violence. And so this, I came deeply depressed, and it is this that you keep hearing from place to place where we are going. In another of the villages, and it's the last story I'll tell, just to tell us what we are confronting. From this home, this man leaves in the morning saying he's going to the market, and in an hour's time, his son actually gets a WhatsApp video. And the WhatsApp video is of, in real time, his father being lynched. Because not only he was going in his car, they stopped the car and said, "You're carrying cow meat." They took him out and they started thrashing him, and then they started taking videos of their thrashing of him, and they started uploading those videos while they were lynching him. And he was begging for mercy, and his son saw it while it was happening on their WhatsApp. And they rushed. His son didn't know how to ride a motorcycle, he was just 17. He went a little and had an accident. The others went. By the time they reached, their father was dead. I do not know what kind of society we are building with this kind of hatred, and this kind of permissive hatred without remorse. The last thing I wanted to say was that when I talk about love, I'm talking about love that arises from enormous courage. The courage that Gauri Lankesh displayed when she stood for people who suffered injustice. So just the last image that I want you to have is, think of Mahatma Gandhi in the last months of his life, which I think were his finest. Because what had happened, you've spoken about Hindu-Muslim unity all your life. He said Hindus and Muslims are like my two eyes, how can I separate them? And 1 million people, 1 million people have died in Hindu-Muslim riots. Blood is flowing across the country. Hatred is at its extreme. The country has got torn apart on these grounds. And still he says, and Pakistan has been formed on religious lines. He says, no, India is a country that belongs equally to all. And in the middle of all of this, I still speak for unity and for love. And I he went to Navkoli, where the hatred and violence was its maximum, and he walked there and fasted there for peace and for love. It is that love that we need to all find in our hearts. In fact, our call at the end of this karma is Chalo Porbandar, Hum Sab Gandhi. Hum Sab Gandhi is a hashtag. We have to find that Gandhi within ourselves. We have to have the courage to speak of love in times of hate. I believe that love is there in many of our hearts. If there is fear, if there is indifference, if there is endorsement, we need to fight that. We need to stand together. We need to love. And it is for that this caravan is here. It is for that I thank you for being with us on this journey.